Hi, I'm Jerry Marchand, and that's my family. I'd like to take the first 90 seconds to lay out the expectations to my session for FlipTech 2020. Let's start with your thoughts of the perfect classroom. Hopefully, it's about building great relationships with students, maybe wishing for a way to manage class size, and creating a fun learning environment. When you think about your students, do you hope they enjoy coming to class, get immediate feedback, and that they master the material they learn? As a teacher in a blended mastery based model, I really get to know my students. I have less grading, and I enjoy teaching a lot more. I'll also share some tips on how to build those relationships, including my secret pancake recipe. I'll also share documents that I use to make it all work. We'll geek out on some data, take a look at the gradebook, and cruise around our LMS to see how it all comes together. When we're done, you'll have the tools you need for whatever the upcoming school year looks like. Our live chat will feature some students who have completed my class so they can offer great insight from the student perspective. All right, people that are here, if you want to just type in the chat, I'll introduce people that I know, but people that are just here to kind of hang out and learn something, could you please just say who you are, where you're from, and what you teach maybe, which might be helpful for us to kind of narrow down. We have some guest speakers as you guys are typing into your chats. I'm going to go left to right as best as I can. Megan Reed, who graduated a couple years ago, she's at Louisville. We have, I don't know where you guys are. There you go. There's Julia, she's at Mizzou. Quinn, oh, Quinn's at the Knowns. And we have Grace Philpy from Western Michigan. These are all two-year graduates. So they can speak to our class, but also hopefully how some of that stuff has kind of trailed into their current life. All right, so I'm just kind of going through our chat just to see who we have here. I can't welcome all of you, but thanks for coming, guys.
Okay. So yeah, does anybody have any questions for Jerry? I've been following him for a couple of years now as far as blended learning and mastery learning. He really is an expert in what he does.
Well, I guess I can start. I have questions.
Thank you, please.
Question. We are a Google Suite school, right?
Bitch.
And we have been, in a way, our transition from the classroom to the online learning was like it was for most of us, like one day to another. But because we are a Google school, for some of us it was a little easier because we were already using um, a lot of things, having a one-on-one kind of classroom setting. But now we're going to go to a particularly blended situation where the groups are going to be divided like in present guys and home guys, and then they're going to be coming one day one group and then one day the other, and then when they are not at classroom they're going to be streaming live, that kind of system. And I guess that is the part that worries me. I don't know if worry is the right word, so I apologize. But it's that's the part that is keeping me awake, that I'm gonna have at the same time kids in the classroom and kids at home. So how can I find the right ways so they don't lose anything, right? Or at least that I know that from my side, I giving them things that the ones that are in the classroom with me um, find that time special, but at the same time that the kids that are at home are not just there, woo-hoo, yeah, whatever, I'm here. You, I don't even know if I'm explaining myself right, but can you
Yeah, I
what
get
I'm
it.
saying?
Yeah, so basically, you said some of the kids are gonna be online because of, and I didn't catch that part, because of choice that they're choosing not to do?
No, the school already, to be able to use the space and the kind of classrooms that we have, having the kids with the right spacing, etc. Our classes are going to be divided in half, and we're going to have some of the kids one day in classroom and the others ones taking the class from home, and then they switch.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
we work in a cycle thing, and in the cycle we will see all the classes 6 times, and if I am the individual student, out of those 6 times, 3 of them are going to be in the classroom and 3 of them they will be at home.
Right. Are you, for your, as you present the material, do you have videos that kids are watching, or do they have textbooks or?
I flip. I already flip.
Okay, so everything's flipped
So
over.
at least that is the part that I am not that concerned, because my kids learn how to deal with that from day one.
Right.
But I guess I'm most concerned about the fact that both things are happening at the same time, the in classroom and streaming. Yeah, I guess that's the in between is what gets me a little off, I guess.
Right. Well, like what I heard since the beginning of like all the flipped classroom stuff is to treat a lot of the stuff as you would as if the kids weren't online. You know, like essentially treat it like they were in your class. If they don't do the work, what do you do normally? If they're not prepared when they come to class, what do you do normally? However, obviously that poses kind of an obstacle when you have kids that are maybe going a few days without seeing you in person, and that's the case for me. And so I guess the best advice I can do is to, when you start off the year, that you really build sort of that relationship where they understand that what they're doing is, and obviously it's across the board, around the world, it's going to be different for everyone, but still, so they understand that what you have in place might seem kind of crazy at first. A lot of students, it takes them maybe a week or 2 to get used to that system. But once they get into a routine, that I think you should definitely help them develop as much as you can. Once they get into a routine, I think it's something that they'll kind of figure it out because they just always do. And the ones that don't, it's, for me, usually a pretty small percentage, but I always have time to meet with the kids that need it.
Yeah.
And the kids that don't. I mean, if there's kids that just are coming in just to kind of hang out and get work done, I have time for them too, you know, even if it's not, you know, there are days where it's crazy, and there's days where I don't really teach for an entire day. I'm like the classroom DJ. And so, you know, there's going to be a lot of things that go on, but for me, something that I've benefited from is I have students that will come back and talk to the students about how the classes run. So if you have any students that you can bring in through video chat and introduce your system to the other students, I think that helps get a little buy-in too, because if students hear it from each other or former students, they're more likely to grab on to what's being said than just like blah, 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 because they hear it from teachers all day long.
So in a way, a little bit of a peer, let me tell you how to be successful in Prof's class kind of thing.
Correct. And I think there's a lot of buy-in if you can get former students to give kind of tips and hints as to how to be successful rather than just hear it from Prof.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. Oh, hi.
Hi. I think that they respond really well to us when we come in and talk to them, especially like, I know with Marchand's blended anatomy classes, like a lot of them are older students, like juniors and seniors.
And that's my population. I have juniors and seniors.
Yeah,
but my other colleagues that are here in the call, one is 6th grade and the other one is 7th grade. You know, so it's a whole different spectrum.
Yeah, but I know what I feel like I see with the upperclassmen in high school is they kind of get to that age where they respond better to people that are around their age. So when we come in and tell them like, you guys have to kind of buck up in this area, do this in this area, and like lean on him for help, then they're like, oh, maybe that would work better than.
So a little bit this is what I did in the class, and like a little survival skills in this kind of environment thing.
And what not to do too, I think is.
Yeah, the do's and don'ts kind of thing.
Yeah, Marchand really lets us kind of throw any question that they want at us, which I think is really helpful for them too, because they're able to ask us anything and we'll respond. But I think that the do's and don'ts of the class is mostly what we talk about, but also how it helped us in the future, especially for the seniors. When we go and talk to them about it, how it helped us in college, and then they're like, ooh, like maybe I should do X, Y, and Z because it's gonna help me in the future when I actually really have to do everything by myself.
Yeah, and I really like how I really liked how everybody came to talk to us. They were able to tell us, like, there was like tons of different point of views of how they did the class. So it's not like do this and you'll get a good grade. It's like you can do A, B, C, or D, and they're like, try it out and see what works for you. And I think that really helped me because my first try of doing things didn't go too hot. So I completely switched it like halfway through the semester, and my grades like skyrocketed from there. So like I really liked how we had different points of views.
For me, I talked to one of the previous students in his class, and she gave me the best advice about you just have to get into your rhythm. You have to figure out what your rhythm is for the class, and then as soon as I figured out this is what I need to do, this is how it needs to be done, I did perfectly fine in his class. But it's that first unit that takes the adjustment of, yeah, this really didn't work and this worked, and then balancing that out so that you can be successful in the course.
I am so glad that you mentioned that, because my plan for the beginning, I don't know how much you guys know about Puerto Rican history, but last summer, our governor resigned out of public pressure, protests in the streets, right? So I started my PR history class. I have this unit called Thinking Like a Historian, and I use all the little strategies that we will use during the whole class with the current event issue, right? So I was thinking probably doing something similar to the history class this semester. And I like what you're saying because I can start seeing those things connecting. Thank you so very much for your help. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Hey, there are a couple quick questions here. Let's see. Pascalito has had their hand up for a while. Pascalito, do you want to ask something? Okay. I'm going to summarize some of the chat questions here. Some of them are related to your former students there, Jerry. Let's see. What are some of your tips? This is from Lisa. Julia, what are some of your tips for students entering a mastery-based class, especially for the first time? And actually, this is directed towards all your former students. Along those lines, let's see, Katie had asked, what works best for you in the blended setting? And what was the toughest issue that your former students encountered?
I think Quinn kind of summarized it really well. It's like the first unit kind of slaps you in the face a little bit because you realize how much work you actually have to do by yourself. Like, Marsh was never, he was always like, I'm going to be here for you, but I want you to put in the work. And I think a lot of students had a really hard time with that the first time, like the first unit that they get. I know I did. I was like,
it's a lot of tough love is what it
yeah,
was.
yeah.
I think Marchand was ready to see you not do so well on the first unit, and he was ready to like grab your hand and be like, all right, we got the rest of the year, like let's get this done. And I think that was really encouraging, knowing that he knows that his students aren't going to do as well as they could do on the first unit.
Yeah. One of the things that helped me throughout the whole class was I sat down every unit and made like a little mock calendar of everything that I wanted to do and when I wanted to get it done. Because they were never really, like with blended, I wasn't really held accountable for anything if we didn't go to class. 'Cause it's not like I had to turn anything in. So I always made a calendar for myself and kind of tried to stick to the due dates that I had planned like on my own and progress that way.
I also think it really helped. This wasn't like our doing, it's more of Marsh's doing. The fact that he didn't tell us this is due at a certain time. It was kind of like, I'm going to put in zeros if you don't get it in soon. And then you get the zero and you're like, great. So then you have to like, obviously you get your points back once you do it. But when the 0 goes in, it's kind of like a big slap in the face, especially when it goes in for like a test or a quiz. And it really kind of like kicks you in the butt and is like, get your stuff done. So I think that really helped as well, along with like how Grace was saying, figure out when you want to get things done. And then also having that little bit of like tough love, like I said. So that really helped too.
Yeah, so guys, what Quinn's talking about is with the tests being a suggested schedule, the zeros go in a week after the test is due in our gradebook. And once that happens, if they haven't taken the test or they've taken the test and they have not completed everything that they were supposed to, which they learn pretty quickly, I'll put in a 0, but then everything goes back to 100% of the grade that they were supposed to have earned. Just again, as kind of a reminder, but you know, some of those parents get the notifications too. So, you know, just kind of a quick reminder for everyone to just know that, hey, you're like a week behind. It's not a big deal unless it's December and we're done in 2 weeks, but you know, you're a week behind. So just kind of make sure you get going.
No.
Samantha, in your video, you explain how students only come into class when they need help. Can you explain, is that the one you're looking for?
Yeah, that one's still missing, Jerry.
Yeah.
So guys, former students, they're asking about what it's like as a student to come in only when you need to, and how our class might be different from a total virtual, 100% virtual environment. And would that be about the same as if you're in school, kind of thing? So somebody take it.
We had those options to come in like whenever we needed to, because a lot of us had other blended classes too. So we would spend, honestly, I spent a lot of time with Marchand doing my A&P stuff because I had the extra time. If students don't have the extra time, then they did have the option to come into class when class wasn't technically being held, you know? And I think that was really nice to know that we had, like, we knew where he was going to be if he wasn't in the classroom that we were being taught in, like, and he was always like, hey, you can come sit next to my desk with me, and if you have issues, like, we can figure it out, you know? And it was always, I think, nice for not only me, but for other students that needed it, to have that opportunity to be in there and work along with their schedules.
Yeah,
I feel like a lot of times concepts wouldn't stick with me on certain topics, and going into Mr. Marchand and being able to sit down and have that one-on-one time and be like, can you walk me through this again? And he was always like, had the time to sit down and do it. But even if you didn't have time to sit down with him, there was always students in his class that they could understand the topic, and Marchand would be like, go see Quinn. Quinn really knows what she's talking about right now. And then Quinn could walk me through it. And it was just like a safe space to ask questions, and everyone wasn't always doing anatomy in that class. So like you could see, okay, I'm doing math homework right now because I need to get this done for next period. Hey, Quinn, can you help me do this problem? So it wasn't just for anatomy, but it was just like an open classroom feel that you can ask questions about any topic.
Yeah, I feel like everybody was always in the same page. Like they're either like, I feel like nobody always had it. Like not everybody, but there was never like the smart person in anatomy. Like there was always somebody that was like, okay, I'm not really getting this right now. But everybody, no matter like what Megan was saying, like if somebody didn't get it, there was always somebody that did if Marchand wasn't available, which 99% of the time he was. But if he was running to the copier because like 50 people decided today I'm going to take the test that was due 4 weeks ago, because we were allowed to do that, then if he wasn't available, there was always somebody else to help you. And that was really nice knowing that, like, you always had somebody.
So you guys, there's another question here from Catherine. She's asking about what worked best for you in a blended setting and what was the toughest. And I already know the toughest. It's being accountable and having that freedom that you probably have to learn how to, you know, manage your time better. Can you guys talk about that stuff?
Time management is definitely, I think, the biggest thing that you have to kind of whip into shape when you get into classes like this, because you have all your resources in front of you and this like list of when you could have it done by. But if you slack off on it, it's going to get ahead of you really quick, and all of a sudden you're going to have all these things that are lined up that you're kind of like, I forgot to do this, and then it just keeps happening. It's like it snowballs, and it's happened, I think, to all of us before when, you know, we're busy with other things, but the time management and the planning with it all that I think needs to be kind of whipped into shape when you get into the classes, I think the biggest thing for students, especially to help them out in their future when they're in college and they have to do this with every other class that they're in. So
yeah, one of the things that really helped me kind of like adapt to the you know, blended learning that Marchand's class was like, I always did, most of the time I went through the units with my friends or other people in the class. So it always helped having other people along with you to be able to kind of talk through every topic and every concept. But if like one person fell behind, you know, we never really waited because it put all of us behind. So it is a lot of that adapting to the time management and to kind of be held accountable for your own like deadlines and stuff.
I definitely think holding yourself accountable was a big one. It was so easy to just be like, oh, I'll just do it tomorrow. Oh, I'll get it done tomorrow. Or, like, I'll get it done later in the day. But, like, as soon as you said, like, no, fourth period, I'm going to be doing anatomy. I'm going to get this done because I'm going to take the test tomorrow. Like, that was a big thing for me. I would make lists with, like, dates of, like, I want this done on this day. I know Grace used to do it, too. And then just making sure I was holding myself accountable to getting it done by that date.
Understand like what I'm capable of, because I used to like tell myself like, all right, I'm gonna have the test done a week early and I'm gonna get on to the next one already, and then like something would happen, and then or like I wouldn't be grasping it, and like I feel like the first semester it was a lot of like personal growth, understanding like what I'm capable of, what I'm able to be able like to get done, and I feel like that was kind of like something I had to learn because this was obviously like one of the hardest classes I've ever taken in high school. So like learning that and also being like justified and like Marchand telling us like it's okay if you're not getting things done all the time. Like you're allowed to take time for yourself. It was always like personal time and make sure you're like taking care of yourself first and then we can get everything else done. So that was something that I definitely learned from this class as well.
I saw Erin has her hand up.
Hi. I started in my classroom in January, so before all this COVID stuff happened. But what I got feedback from are my students. So I'm okay with the videos. I'm okay with my practice. I'm okay with how I'm going to group. The big thing for me that I got feedback from my students was they didn't know what they were supposed to do when. And that's kind of mind blowing to me because everything was in a hyperdoc and it was like numbered of like, do this, do this, do this. So I would love to see exemplars of how you put your laws out there, Jerry, and then also from the students, like what helped them the most of like knowing what things are. Like, I mean, I put everything in one hyperdoc for kids, and they still were like, I didn't know what I was supposed to do, and I don't know if that was just excuses or they really had no idea where they should be going. So.
Erin, I missed the beginning part when you said what grade, I think.
Mainly it was my 10th through my regular level geometry, grade level geometry that they were like, I don't know what I was supposed to do.
Gotcha.
Or when I was like, what order I was supposed to do things in, which again, kind of mind blowing to me, but.
Right, yeah. And my wife teaches fourth grade and she had some of the same things too. So we probably all do.
I think fourth graders and 10th grade boys have a lot of similarities.
Yeah. I can show you some stuff that I use, but I have a quick question. Do you guys use an LMS or you on Google Classroom or?
So yeah, we're on Google Classroom. So what I did was I made a Google Doc for each week, and
Gotcha.
I put hyperlinks of like, okay, here are your videos, here's your assignment, here, over here were the links to the blank notes and the blank practice sets so that you could print them out if you had them at home. The practice sets, I use GoFormative for them putting their answers in. I still need to see their work, but for them to check their answers for immediate feedback, I use that. So it was like a link of videos, practice, whatever, and they still had no idea where they were. Okay.
I have one suggestion. I'm going to turn it over to my other experts here, is that I think the students benefit from something that they can write on and check off as they're going. Essentially they could, so they're sitting at home, they could show it to their parents. You could have that conversation with them and their parents. But I think that's something that they can check off as they're going, because I think I had the same trouble with my kids, my offspring, as they were going through their remote learning. They're reading this Google Doc and just seeing everything, and I think it's kind of a lot, even though I agree with how you kind of spaced it.
I will show you my, I didn't feel like there was a lot on there. Like,
no,
literally number of Yeah.
Yeah, I get you, because
Yeah, like
that's
the
how my
directions weren't on there.
children are the same way. I was like, guys, it's right there. It tells you to go on to, So, but I would say the one thing in response to that is something that, and you can make let me just, 1 second. You can make a checklist pretty quickly. And
Yeah, I was about to say the checklist was a big thing for your class that helped.
all right, so
Yeah, I still use the checklist, and I make checklists at school now too.
So I'll show you the checklist, but for those of you that are probably, sorry, I super zoomed out so that my presentation.
Yeah, so you use a Google Sheet. Like, I know how to make checklists in Google Sheets and stuff like that. I mean, I'm super Google savvy.
Gotcha.
It was more of like the organization of things, and I think that's in my head right now is like I need to see how other people are doing it and then take all those ideas and do it the best for me. So it's
without
a matter of
your system, I think it sounds like you have a system that makes sense, but here's what my students see when they come to our LMS, which is formerly known as Haiku, currently PowerScore Learning. And so it's a little more complex than I think what your Google Doc looked like. But I think
I'm sorry, I didn't finish it. I put a Google Doc inside of Google Classroom, so like week, whatever the date was. So.
Okay, and so I think what I was talking about with giving the kids something that they could check off as they're going.
Okay.
And this is electronic, so it's got some comments in there because it's the first checklist of the year, and so it shows them tells them hey, you should be doing this, you should be all that stuff on the right. But they get a paper copy of this too, and I think the students appreciate writing stuff down more than any kind of digital format. So
totally. And that's why, when we were in the classroom, they always had, a copy of the guided notes. They always had a copy of the practice set. When we went to distance learning, that's when I think things became, because a lot of kids don't have printers at home. I'm a firm believer of little less paper, but not paperless kind of thing. So.
All right, former experts, take it away.
So for me, even in college, so I go to University of Louisville in Kentucky, and they are very paperless, even professors, which I think is for most colleges, but even just taking a piece of paper and writing out my own checklist, I can do on a piece of scrap paper, and I can keep it, and it holds me to that point of, okay, these are the things that needs to be done. And I do them in order. So I'm never going to put a test at the first thing on a list. I'm always going to put it at the bottom because that's the last thing I do. And so I think just making sure you have a list that they can check by, or even showing here's Mr. Marchand's list, which obviously is extra. But if you can just show them, you can even do it on a piece of lined paper, and it will get the same job done. It's just making sure that they know exactly what's laid out and what has to be done, and then consistency. Because Marchand always has the same amount of stuff, always has the same order of things that need to be done, and it's always a similar setup. So it's never going to be he's throwing a curveball at you, and you have no idea what's going to be due that week, which helped.
Yeah, I think a big thing for me with Marchand's checklists was the consistency, because it was the same thing every single unit. So I was able to go in and do everything from that unit, and it kind of helped me learn better because I knew what to expect. I knew how to study. I knew the right way how to take notes and whatnot. So when I got to college, I then took my syllabus, which had every single assignment we had for the entire semester, and it was very overwhelming. But I took it and made my own checklist with due dates and when I want to do things, and I made sure for every single unit that I took notes the same way, and I did the same things outside of class to prepare for the exams and to study for quizzes, because I think having that consistent checklist and having that consistency in your class really helps you kind of get in the groove, and it also helps with the blended learning and virtual.
Aaron, another thing that in our grade book for the first couple of units, which is essentially about the first month or so of school, I put eventually, within a month, I have every assignment for the whole entire semester entered into the grade book already with due dates. And so I'm assuming that parents can, and most of them do, look into those things when they need to. And so when I have the grade book set up and every single category, every test, every assignment, everything is already in there with due dates, and then just explain to everyone, these are the due dates. You have a week past that before I put any of the grades in, and then once that happens, then you'll kind of know that you're behind, sort of thing. And so I think not only a checklist and some simple version, and someone just posted a blog link in the chat too that you might want to check out from Ken, but also having that in the grade book already set up, I think helps too.
Yeah, and I mean, it's in PowerSchool. I guess it was, and I'm happy to, maybe I'll just throw in a link to the doc that I used. I mean, it was consistent every week from COVID on for 11 weeks. And again, I don't know if it was, they like got out of that document and they didn't know how to get back in. I don't know if it was like, you know, with Go Formative, like, they're in the, you can give them a direct link to what they need to do, but then once they're in there, if they go back to their formatives, it's all over the place. There's really no way for it to be organized. So I don't know if that was the case. And it's, yeah, so for me, it's just how do I keep them like in, whether it's in LMS or whatever, keep them in this, that this is their checklist. Because, and maybe I need more of just a checkbox kind of thing and not a numbered system. I don't know, but
that's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, for them just to enter it as they go. I really think there's value in the students being able to write stuff down, check things off as they go, and even if they're not physically checking it, they can write on something all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Samantha, you asked about teachers going into mastery blended learning for the first time. It's a complete disaster. And
actually, hey Jerry, can I just interrupt real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
She's got 3 questions actually. And when you're done with that, she was wondering, how does mastery blended learning look? 100% virtual. And I think she wanted you to expand a little on the general checklist, which I think you just did, but I'm sorry. So
okay.
she was asking about teachers moving to blended learning for the first time.
Okay. Yeah, Samantha, if that checklist thing didn't cover, and guys, I can put all these, I can share all this stuff with you guys. So if you want access to this stuff, we'll do that. So at the end, and I'll put that in the chat. But as far as like my first year doing this, I was making the videos for this, making the videos for biology, and doing everything else at the same time. It's like I was up till 1, 2 in the morning, and it was hard. But I don't regret it for a second, because since that time, it's been me getting to know my students and working with them one-on-one always, which I think is better for me, but it's also the best for them, and we know that. But when the remote learning thing took place in March, everyone was freaking out. Teachers and schools and everyone across the country and world was freaking out on how we do this. But for my students, it was just like, guys, we'll figure out the testing thing. But as far as like how things are going to go, just keep doing what you're doing, because really that didn't change too much besides not being able to come in for labs and have the resources for that stuff. But like that stuff, we made it work.
This is a little while ago. I've been keeping my eye on questions. Lisa asked, what kind of parent prep or information do you give out at the beginning of the year?
That was the one. So our school has parent night, which isn't until like a month after school starts. But as far as like parent interaction, we have access to all their emails, which are kind of in the database of PowerSchool, which is our data housing. And so I can email them all at the beginning of the year and say, here's the syllabus, here's the expectations, and I've given your kids the first 5 days basically without doing any science, just to kind of get the feel of what's going on. We had kids come in and graduates come in. And so as far as parents go, I really have almost never any issues with the way things are run, because so much of it comes back to, well, what is your child doing or not doing? And that's so transparent that it really makes it easy for me to not get into any trouble, like having to answer a million questions. Now, when remote learning came up, it was odd because now we had to figure out like how kids are going to take tests and everything, but that's kind of a separate issue. But at the beginning, I just lay everything out right away, and the students after the first week know exactly, know the expectations and have been given a chance to both fail and succeed equally, which I think is important. As someone mentioned, one of the students mentioned earlier, is that they have a chance to fall flat on their face, but they also know that I have everything provided digitally and in person that they could need if they had to come to me and get it.
So if I could ask a quick follow-up question on that.
Yeah.
You know, so your students are very well spoken and I love what they're saying. But one small detail I picked up on is that they have other blended classes. In my school, that's quite the minority. I'm one of very, very few. In fact, when I started flipping, I mean, it was a while. I think I'm going on 6, 7, 8 years now at this point. And I've kind of moved to more of a blended format, but I also teach English, by the way. Where I'm still stumbling a bit is, you know, you say sending out the emails to all the parents. We have a similar system, but we have a lot of emails that get kicked back from mailer demons, and there's issues with that. So I'm just curious about, even when you just got started with this kind of thing, because you've got an incredibly well-oiled machine now, what kinds of stumbling blocks did you kind of encounter, and how did you overcome them for somebody who would try to go into a full mastery model? It's kind of one of my crusades. I haven't mastered the art yet, and it's, you know, some of the things that you guys have been showing today and I hope to see for the rest of the week are really helping me feel very optimistic about it.
Well, yeah, I hope you do, and you should, because there are a lot of people doing this and versions of this that'll help you through it. One thing I want to point out too, that in order to get those, eliminate the parent reject emails, is one of the first assignments I give them is show your parents this email or the syllabus, and their assignment is to fill out a Google form, and the parents give me their student's name, their name, and their current email that they do use, because who knows the last time they entered an email for the school might have been 10 years ago, right? So that allows me to have all their emails in one spot, and emails that I know or I trust that work. So that's something that I would encourage, especially now that we're into this weird what's going on.
And it's such a simple thing too. It's a good point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so stumbling blocks, everything, because the only thing that I knew I was going to do is provide these resources to my students on the checklist, and I had all the videos done. The things that I did not expect were going to happen, a lot of good things, many of them that were already mentioned by the students, is that they really started latching onto each other and helping each other because they knew they could. They knew that they were successful in a unit and someone was a few days or a week behind, and that I could say, like, hey, Megan's like, hey, we're studying Unit 9. And I'm like, oh, well, Quinn just took Unit 9. Why don't you go talk to her, because she'll be able to actually help you better than I can, because she can tell you how she studied rather than just like what the content is. That, you know, like I'm not the expert as far as like how to get ready for that test, and the students are. And that was very valuable discussion that took place in my class that I didn't expect either. Something else that happened that I was worried about were like the relationships, and like how would I get to know my students if they weren't in class every single day, which now all of us are like, oh my God, what's happening this fall? But when we start the year and the first 3-4 days are not school at all, I think that helps build that trust and the relationship where you can start developing a lot faster. The way that I described it to my students was like going on vacation for a week when you're a kid, you meet all these kids, you hang out, and all of a sudden they're gone, poof, and like the best you can do is maybe contact them digitally, right? And I felt that was going on with my seniors. So I started taking the beginning of the year as like get to know each other time, but like days of get to know each other time, which I think helps the relationships and helps them buy into kind of what's going on. As far as like one of the things that I learned from them that I think I mentioned in the video was that the students kind of determine the schedule. Like I had an idea of how it should go and how long it should take, but when they got the freedom to decide that I think I need a few more days or I need the weekend, and they started pushing those units to 2 or 3 or 4 days past the suggested due date, that's when I realized that really it's the timing of everything that I do, and probably much of what we do, all of us, is the timing of it all. And if I'm going to say like everyone has to be ready to test on Friday because that's when we're testing and we're moving on, like what does that tell my students, right? Like what's more important to my students? Is it that we're moving on, or is that I care about how you're doing? And I think that was a huge part of what happened that I kind of had to figure out as I was going, that they helped me understand what they needed. And a lot of that was just more time. And now the problem comes where like it's December and there's kids that are a month behind. Well, the kids that are almost done, or I'm comfortable letting them finish up without me having to help them too much, I can go back and find those kids that really need me, right? And a lot of us, if we're going into some sort of blended hybrid remote learning, are going to have those experiences where you have kids that you don't hear from. When we first started all of the blended thing, I went to the 2 other teachers that started with me, and I was like, hey, what are you guys doing about these kids that you haven't heard from and have been in your class for a month and you don't even know who they are because they just decided they're not going to come to class anymore? We have that same problem now with remote learning too, right? And so we had to put in a lot of pieces as far as like taking attendance and all, so many things that we had to put in place to stop these students from just disappearing because they're the kids that kind of don't care as much as they should if you're a teacher or a parent. And so as far as when we first got started with blended learning, that was a huge part where kids would just vanish and we had no idea who they were or where they were.
Hopping on to what you said about adding, like, not having, like, this is the day that you get to take the test, I feel like that really helped me learn. I'm not sure about everybody else, but I feel like that really helped me because I was able to take, like, the time that I needed to get my stuff done and actually learn the content instead of just, like basically, like, throwing up information onto a page. I actually, like, sort of knew what I was talking about for, like, the most part, but I feel like I learned it a lot easier and understood, like, how I learned better because I was able to take the time that I needed to.
At first, I definitely was like, why won't this dude just give me a test date? I was like, this guy just needs to tell me when I need to take this test. But then, like, after I stopped and thought about it, like, instead of stressing about the test, I was making sure I understood the concepts, like Quinn was saying, where it wasn't just, like, this test, I need to get an A on it. It was, do I actually understand this information? Which, coming back into, so last semester at school, I took my first anatomy class. And it was 10 times easier because I actually knew the information from high school, and I was able to build on that with, like, college and what else they were wanting me to know without stressing about getting the A on the test. So in the long run, I see how it helped me, but I definitely think at the beginning I was like, this guy's killing me with these tests. Like, I just need him to give me dates. But
yeah, before Marchand's anatomy class, I had, like, really bad test anxiety. I would freak out the day of the test, but having the flexible test dates, I was able to actually learn the content and understand the content and know what I was talking about before I took the test. And, there'd be times when I'd take a test and no one else in the entire class was taking a test and people were just, like, taking notes or, like, studying with each other on other units. And it, like, not having that, like, really, really stressful test environment also helped me because it just, like, made it so relaxed in his classroom. And then I was kind of able to take that mentality, like, to college with me, and it has helped me, like, significantly, like, during tests and exams at school too.
I see a question from Samantha asking, actually it probably has a lot to do with reducing test anxiety and test stress as preparing for those tests through mastery checks. Her question is, how do you create your mastery checks? Certain platform, certain app?
Yeah, and so this also leads into Andrew's question about meaningful assessment, and our experts can pop on and give some input too in a second. As far as preparing for the assessment, so I live in this weird world where I would like to be 100% Chris Baker, our moderator, and allow students to assess patients and do things in class and be a lot more applicable to when you graduate college. Are you going to be ready as an EMT, as a nurse, as a doctor to perform these jobs? However, I struggle with these students right now that we're talking to having to go to school in their next year and take assessments that I know are not going to be those assessments. And I kind of have to balance, unfortunately, this world of, like, I have to prepare you for college, even though it's maybe not the best instruction that you're going to get, but I got to get you ready for that, because if you don't survive that, you're screwed, right? And so our assessments in our class are our old-fashioned multiple choice tests, except for they've been categorized by the learning targets. And so as you maybe saw on our so this is like the landing page for a unit. The students see immediately on the first page, and really the only important thing on this page is that they can see what they're going to be learning. And so they get that pre-check that I mentioned in the video. They're going to get learning targets or standards, objectives in question format, but they're also going to get a breakdown of the test essentially as well. And that's going to tell them, hopefully, what things they know or don't know, how well they need to know it, because some of them have 6 questions, or some might have 12 questions, or some might only have 2 questions. That's going to help them prepare as they study too. And I think that transparency is really important, because there's no surprise moments on the test, or hopefully not surprise moments on the test where like, hey, we didn't really talk about this, but I'm going to ask you to know this for the test. I'm hoping that doesn't happen, or if it does, it's an accident, and then I can fix it. And then the next year or for the next week, students don't have to go through that. And so that's what students see when they first get onto a unit page. There's the pre-check form, which is just the Google form. Files, links, and practice is kind of where just a lot of the stuff is: notes, objectives, checklists, extra links, online practice stuff like that. Answer keys sometimes, but I started making answer key pages, a separate sub page. The mastery checks, because I'm giving mostly multiple choice tests, the mastery checks are also multiple choice quizzes. You can do this through Google Forms and easily insert that into your Google Classroom, but I put it on our LMS, which is Power School Learning, because as a Google Form will do, it tells the kids how they do right away, and so they don't have to wait and come to me or work through some other system to find out how they're doing and if they should move on or not, if they're ready to move on or not to the next portion of that unit. And so as you see the mastery checks, and I would suggest doing this in a Google form too, the mastery check and kind of like that description part tells them which objectives they're going to get from, on the back of the checklist, that list of unit objectives, which objectives are going to be asked. The same objectives that are asked in question format, short answer question format, on their pre-check form and post-check form, which some students like and some students hate. It's just a matter of like figure out what you need and what works for you and do it. But here's what that kind of intro to a mastery check looks like. And then it's just a 5-question multiple choice quiz that is only worth 4 points, and those 4 points are if you got a 4 or a 5 on the first 3 attempts, and you took it all 3 times. They can take them 5 or 6 or 10 times, and they can reset their attempts. They can take it 15 times, but they have to take it 3 times, each one 3 times, and they have to at least on one attempt get a 4 or a 5 out of 5. And so that whether or not your tests are multiple choice doesn't really matter, as long as your checks along the way mimic the format. So if I was doing, and we do a lot of labeling in this class, and there's certainly a lot of labeling portions to what we do, but as far as like just the multiple choice part of the assessment, I'm mimicking multiple choice in the practice quizzes, mastery checks, and those are not reworded test questions. They are me going completely just from the objectives and saying, all right, these are the things that I'm going to want students to know. And I haven't, when I made most of these, I didn't look at the tests for like the last 9 or 10 months. I started doing these in the summer. And so I was making questions just off the top of my head because I knew that they were important and that they were going to come up again. And so the students kind of use those mastery checks in a couple different ways, and I'll let them talk about it. Some of them use them as a guide to what they are going to be learning. Some of them do a lot of things before they do the mastery checks, but I tell them to save at least 1 attempt on each mastery check and do them all at once as a kind of practice test before the test. And I'd like when you girls to pop in and just kind of explain how those things kind of tie together and hopefully explain how they work to these.
Well, I think like something that I really, sorry guys, I think something I really had to learn was that for the pre-checks, like you're not going to know really anything. And that was something that like frustrated me at first. I'm like, am I supposed to know this stuff? Like it was like in-depth stuff. And then once like you go through and you start doing the mastery checks, something I really liked is that not all of them, but sometimes you would see those like reoccurring, maybe in like different wording, but like on the like exam. So that would be really nice. So it made it worth doing them and actually understanding what you were doing instead of just like clicking random answers. Like, sure, I got a 4. Like if you actually did them to do them and like learn from it, it really helped. And then it was kind of rewarding because then in the post check, you're kind of like, oh, I know that. You're like, I learned that. It's like, it really helps because you like learned a lot throughout it and you get to see that progress. So that's why I really liked them.
Yeah, for me, for the mastery check, since we had to do them 3 times, I would do the pre-check like right away. Normally the night I took the exam. And then I would do the first mastery check like the next day without having covered any material, just to kind of see how much I like knew. And then I would watch the notes videos and take the other notes, do everything else required. Then I do the master checks one more time. And then the third time to do them, I would normally do it the night before the exam as like a last minute study tool. And I would also do the post check the night before the exam as a last minute study tool, which sucked because if you did it 24 hours before the exam, you got docked a point, but I just like didn't care because I used it as a study tool, and it was like my last minute, like, do I know every single thing I need to know for this exam? And I felt like doing the master checks and the post checks, you know, I started to see myself knowing and understanding these topics and being able to kind of like regurgitate the information as opposed to just like memorizing for the exam and never knowing what I learned again. So
a big study tool for me, like Grace, was the post check, because if you knew what was on the post check, you knew what was on the test. Like Marcian mentioned it, like you're never gonna have a curveball on one of his tests. You've seen all the questions at least once, whether it was in a mastery check or the post check, and there's no reason that you shouldn't have known the information because you had so many opportunities to see it and ask him questions, that the tests were easier once you started using the mastery checks the right way and the post check.
So can I just ask a quick follow-up question? Are the mastery checks, like when you take it, 3 times, is it the same questions all 3 times, or do you have different questions?
Yeah, so ultimately the goal would be to have a system that does not exist, and I'm going to make it and become a billionaire or maybe make $1,000, is some system that allows teachers to enter into a test bank, and the test bank pulls from that a certain amount of questions. Like you want 3 questions from objective 1, 2 questions from objective 2, and since I don't have that option without making several different versions of the same thing, the mastery checks are that those 3 attempts are 3 attempts on the exact same questions. They just come up in different order. Questions come in different order, and I think the answers are jumbled every time. But essentially, they are the same questions all 3 times. And so that's, again, just because I don't have a way to do it any better, I wish I did, but that's what they look like. And part of the reason, too, is I'm thinking of, like, why did I do it this way, besides not having another system, is because of the retrieval practice, for them to, you know, like practice, because, again, like Quinn said, that if you start seeing things a few times, then you probably want to make sure you learn it. And so that was not what I wanted to do.
I was just going to say that I feel like them being the same questions helped me more than harmed, but that's also because in this class, like, we actually had to learn things, like, and learn them instead of just, like, memorizing. So I feel like that really actually did help me learn it, because then I was able to make, I don't remember what the word is, but, like, you have, like, the letters and you, like, make a saying for something to remember it.
Mnemonics?
Yes, sure. So that really helped me, and I was able to do that a lot for this class, and then, like, tell my other student, like other fellow students, like, what I was able to do. And that also helped with the mastery conferences, because I'd be like, does anybody know or, like, have anything, like, to remember this by? And, like, you get, like, 30 replies of people saying, like, a little bit, like, tweaked of different, like, ways to memorize it and, like, actually learn it, and that really helps getting everybody else's perspective.
We're almost not out of time, but there are folks that are leaving for other conference presentations that are starting live. But there are a couple more questions that seem to have popped up regarding your pre-checks, your mastery checks, and your post-checks. What is a pre-check and post-check? How does that work with a mastery check? And also, how do all those things look in a 100% virtual environment, as far as students taking these assessments from home versus in front of you in the classroom?
Pre-checks, mastery checks, and post-checks, nothing changed as far as doing them in class doing them at home or being forced to do them at home via remote learning, because the students could always do these whenever they want. I actually tell them on one of your attempts, maybe try taking the same mastery check with someone, have them sit down next to you. As they are explaining how they remembered something, it might trigger something to help you remember that same thing or something completely different, but in the same way, like Quinn is saying. And so pre-checks are just a list of our unit objectives. Each unit has anywhere from like 10 to 15 or so objectives. And so that's what the pre-check and post-check are based off of. It's just a short answer in a Google form. Identify the different types of vital signs. They write their answers, or they put, I don't know, like Quinn said. If they don't know, it's fine, because it's before you've learned any of this stuff, so it's fine. And if they take a pre-check and every single answer is I don't know, they still get 4 points, because that's just the nature of the beast. Is I'm more interested that they see what's coming up and not get surprised by anything that they're going through and looking up all the answers for the pre-check, because I tell them I really don't care if you don't know. That's the whole point of this. And so that pre-check is seriously very informal. So is a post-check. If they turn in stuff that has 3 or 4 I don't knows on a post-check, then I just tell them, well, like, hey, you probably need to come find me, or talk to someone who took the test, or someone who's getting ready for the test, and go talk to them about those 3 or 4 things, because those 3 or 4 things are going to be on the test in some way. And so you need to find your way of understanding that material, however that works. And so that's what the pre and post checks are. They're just Google Forms that are short answer. I can't click on the short answer versions of the unit objectives. And the mastery checks are a little more detailed, but still go back to the unit objectives. All the same thing. So this mastery check's going to be about objectives 1, 2, and 3. Same objectives you saw on the pre-check and you'll see on the post-check. And you know there's 5 questions. In some mix of these 3 objectives, it might be 1, 2, 2, 1, 2, 1, 4, 1, 0. It's never 0, but maybe 3, 2, 3, 1, 1 or something. And so those questions, usually if there's an objective or 2 that are kind of heavy in that unit, that they'll, like these 2 here, they'll be their own mastery check, because there's probably 2 or 3 questions that I want them to see in different ways to see it. But as far as like in-class, blended, at home, or forced at-home remote learning, nothing changed or changes with the pre, post, and mastery checks.
So I'm sorry, really quickly, what's the difference between a mastery check and a post check then?
Yeah, post check is going to go through all the objectives and ask them to answer in short answer. And so they're not getting an immediate response whether they're right or wrong. It's more of a way for them to sum it up on, a lot of them do it actually on a Google Doc and then paste those into the Google form, which is the post check. But the pre and post check are the exact same thing. It's just a short answer version of the objectives. The mastery check is a little more detailed and probably has, it has a lot more of the vocab in there and a lot more of the nuances of questions that are going to come up in that unit. But basically the post check, what I tell the students is, if you can fill out the post check in short answer and you're comfortable with what you have down there and you don't have any questions for me, then you're just take the test, because you're pretty much ready to go. And so the mastery checks are them getting immediate feedback on that 5-question quiz. How did they do? Did they get 1 out of 5? Did they try really hard and get a 0? Did they not try really hard and get a 4? Those are still gauging whether or not they're ready, but the mastery checks go in shorter chunks. So if you can go from mastery check 1 to 2, then you're probably good to go to 3. If you got them all 4 done, then you're ready to take the post check. All of those things that are on the bottom of the checklist have to be done or are supposed to be done. And sometimes they sneak by and then have to put a 0 in their grade book just until they get it done. But all these things on the bottom of the checklist are the things that they have to do in order to take the test. So it's a different system than some mastery-based systems where they don't move on to the next unit until they get a certain score on the unit test, 80% or so. My system is a little bit different in that if they're okay with the 69, I'm okay with the 69. Let's, continue the learning.
I guess just a general question is, if like we kind of are digesting everything that we hear and like have questions, I know your email was on the slide. Can we just email you other questions?
Yes, I would encourage you to contact me through email, or let's connect on Twitter. I can even put you in contact with students because they are happy to answer questions too. And since it's summer, they're not all too busy right now. So yes, please, let's connect.
Something
And I'm
that
not in a hurry to leave right now. So if anyone wants to stick around for a few minutes and ask more questions, please do that. Go ahead, Quinn.
Something that I really think that also helped the class was how available Marjan was, like whether it was like through email or like literally like the fastest way to get like through was like through Twitter, because he did like a lot of like HHS anatomy stuff through Twitter, and it was really easy to get like, you'd get a response within like 5 minutes. Like he said, he's up to like 1 a.m, just like how we were. So if you were like, I'm tired, I'm stressed, I'm gonna cry, he's like, it's gonna be okay, I'm gonna help you. And he would stay up like as late as you needed to. And that was something that I've never had a teacher do before. So that was something that was like really awesome and really helped, knowing that he was right there with us, and it wasn't kind of like, you're on your own, have fun, try to get a good grade. It was like he was holding your hand without holding your hand, if that makes any sense.